All right, folks. Hello and happy day. We're going to give this a try. Our first flipped lesson, which you're probably doing in class, but nonetheless, we'll call it a flipped lesson for Unit 1 in U.S. History. And I'm going to title this set of notes, Geography is Destiny. So what you want to do is you want to go at the end or the bottom of your Collisions of Cultures assignment. So if you're looking at this assignment, the Collisions of Cultures assignment, by now you should be done with topics 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then you get down to this bottom part that says Mr. Canale will give me the notes. We're just going to go over these three key concepts because they're really important in making sure you don't come up with a biased opinion of how things went when the two cultures collided. The Native American cultures, all hundreds of them, collided with the European cultures that showed up. So the first thing we want to recognize is that the cultures are very different, which is what you've been doing on this assignment. You already know that, right? That the way that they lived, that the way that they dressed, that the way that they fought, these different cultures were very different. But the key thing that we want to understand is that there isn't a situation where one was better than the other, and certainly not that one was smarter or better equipped. It did not happen that these cultures met on an equal playing field, right? You can imagine a sport where one team got to practice, the other team didn't. The game necessarily wouldn't be very fair. So the Native Americans and the Europeans met in the 15 and 1600s, but they were at very different points in their culture, having to do with what you talked about back in 8th grade, geography, right? The big determining factor when these cultures met was not what color they were, was not who their leaders were, was not how tough they were. It really came down to, in large part, geography, the world around them. Now, these seem like goofy, random photographs, but they're actually really related to how different the two geographies of North America and Europe were. So, North America, never, not even today, do we have access to, unless you count llamas, but llamas are just in a small part of the world, and they're not that helpful. But let's get back to our point. North America never, even today, has had access to native animals that are easily domesticated, right? Now, the word domesticated, that's an ACT word that means tamed for human use, right? So we know that dogs are the descendants of wolves, but we're not nervous around dogs, at least most of us. Cats are the long descendants of large cats. But if we look at animals that can actually do work, no offense to all you cat and dog people, but when we talk about large animals that can do work, to domesticate them or to tame them, there really have never been any animals in North America that you can do that to, like I said, with one exception. So if you look at moose, these are large animals, but they've never been domesticated. They've always been wild. Meanwhile, in Europe, they had animals that could be easily domesticated in the form of horses and cows. Now, horses, a lot of people associate with North America because they've been here for so long, but the Spanish actually brought horses to North America. Before that, the Native Americans had access to almost no animals that they could tame and then use. And why is that important? Two things. Tame animals can do work for humans, whether it's make food, provide transportation, or plow fields. But here's the other one that sounds kind of weird. It sounds like a bad thing, but in the long run, it's actually a good thing. Tame animals expose humans to different diseases. Because if you live near these animals, and I'm talking over generations and generations and generations, every once in a while, some weird animal disease, you're there milking your cow and you get some weird cow mucus and it accidentally gets in with mixed in with some. Humans once in a while will get a disease that has mutated or changed from the animals, and then the humans get sick with it. And what that does over hundreds of years is the human body gets used to these weird diseases and is able eventually to fight them off. So that's the first big advantage, is that Europe, not because they were better, smarter, stronger, they just happen to have animals that were easier to tame. Two other things that Europe had that North America had no shot at. One, easy to find minerals to create the strongest metals. In North America, they're all very deep underground. Maybe you've actually been to northern Minnesota and you've either seen these big open pit mines, these huge holes. They look like lakes. They look like empty lakes sometimes because the holes are so big and deep. Or maybe you've even been to this place in northern Minnesota called the Sudan mine. The point is, the metals or the minerals that we turn into metals that are found in North America are very deep underground. In Europe, not as deep. Pretty easy to reach them, at least it was back in the 1500s. Right? Now, here's a direct quote from one of the articles that we read about the Mississippian people, the people who founded the city of Cahokia. They made things out of copper, shell, stone, wood, and clay. Okay, a bunch of things, because they were smart enough and creative enough to use the tools that they had around them. Copper was the only metal that was really easily accessible to them. And copper, whether or not you know this, is a pretty soft metal. You've never really seen a copper sword or a copper rifle, because copper is not a good metal that's going to handle heat and is going to handle intense pressure. Other metals that are easier to find in Europe are much easier to make into things like swords and guns. And then the other one is wheat. Wheat, although we have a lot of wheat in America today, was not natural to North America. There was nowhere in North America where wheat was. And wheat's really important because it's a crop that grows fast and can feed a lot of people. So you can put 5 people in charge of a wheat farm, and then the other people can work on other skills. There were no crops quite like wheat where it was easy for large groups of people to farm it, to eat it, and then you can give other people other jobs, right, which allows your society to be more complex. Not that Native American society wasn't complex, but they didn't have the advantage of being able to have professional farmers. And then the sad one is the last one, which is one that you know a lot about actually already, is this idea of disease, right? It's hard to measure, but almost certainly these diseases that the Europeans brought with them, with their large domesticatable animals, with their history of living together in these large cities, and they could live together in the large cities because they had products like wheat and metals. They brought these diseases. It almost certainly killed millions of Native Americans. Sometimes the Native Americans died before large numbers of Europeans even arrived, because all it would take is one European to spread a very deadly disease. And so the communities that were left, the Native American communities, were just recovering from this devastating set of diseases, right? So this isn't obviously a Native American burial ground, but trying to get a visual on the number, the millions of Native Americans who died. This is kind of a cool picture. It has both traditional Native American burial techniques, and then also the idea of a coffin and being buried under the ground. So this is an example of how Native Americans today merge the two cultures together. But the point is that these diseases left the Native American cultures many times very weak, because most or a lot of their population had been killed by these diseases. If you think back to 9th grade, how weak Europe was after the plague, right? This is where we talk about the Dark Ages or the Middle Ages, where society kind of shrunk down for a while because so many people had died. Well, the Native Americans were kind of going through this similar Dark Ages or Middle Ages or difficult time because so many Native Americans had been killed. So what we want you to take away from this is that when the two cultures collided, Native Americans and all their diversity and the Europeans, when those two groups got together in North America, they weren't meeting on an equal playing field, because the Europeans, just because of where they lived, they had these huge advantages of animals, metals, certain kinds of food, and this idea that the diseases had already affected them a long time ago. So you should have, if you go now to your Collisions of Cultures assignment, you should have this bottom section all filled in. You can rewatch this video or go back and pause it so you can get all these filled in. But this is some key differences between the cultures that we're looking at in Unit 1. Thanks for listening.